Before the success stories, the progress, there was you. You who made a choice to grow, to inspire, to overcome your own challenges. At NASM, we're in service of your limitless potential, because when you keep growing, we all get stronger, and we'll never stop making your journey our mission. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified personal trainer.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this week on the Master Instructor Roundtable. Marty Miller, my co-host and fellow Master Instructor, Wendy Batts. Wendy, how's everything going today?
It is great, Marty. How are you?
I'm doing good. As we go into the summer here, it's always good to talk about things that are very relevant. Got a great friend and obviously an expert in this area about golf performance, because it is that time of year where everybody in the country can be golfing. You know, not everyone lives in sunny Florida like me, where golf's a year-round sport, but we know with the sports like Top Golf and all that, the rounds are up. So we thought that would be a great opportunity to bring an expert in golf performance as well as the NASM OPT model. So let's bring in my good friend, Tom Hemmings.
Thank you, Marty. Hey, Wendy. How are you?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Very well. Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. First off, I'm a huge fan of this, and I think it's a great resource for the exercise community to have this resource and see different professionals come on board.
Well, thanks for joining us. And we are live today. So as we go through this, if you guys have any questions for Tom, please be sure to put them in the comments and we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. But my first question, Tom, I have for you is, can you just let our audience know a little bit about your background and then how that led you to working with professional and amateur golfers?
Sure. Well, I've got to be honest, I came over here and played soccer in college, and just really I love soccer, always around sports, always around personal training. I really took my time in college to kind of understand training as, just more of a hobby, shadowing people. And in my junior year, I kind of got an idea of wanting to get certified. So that was when I turned to a National Academy of Sports Medicine. I was like, right, I've got to get a start on this. So I decided to get certified, and from that point, I actually got in my spare time, other than soccer, I kind of got on some other sports teams within the university where I was, and got some experience with them, and realized that I wanted to be in sports. I didn't know what sport it was going to be, because I just wanted to get a taste of everything. And as I went through to my masters, and I continued to be involved with sports and focus on more of the kinesiology side, physiology side, and through internships, I did soccer back in England. I did corporate fitness over in the States, and just sort of got my feet wet in all different areas. And from that, I kind of was exposed to a lot of top professionals, and just how they did it, what worked, what didn't, and just around some really good trainers in general. And from that, I just sort of, I wanted to find my niche, and I didn't quite know what that was. Once I finished my masters, I remember talking to my wife, who's a dietitian. We were in the same boat. We finished our masters. We got set, and we're like, right, where are we going to go? And I'm sure you can relate to that somewhere or the other. And we're like, okay, right, what are we going to look for? So I come across Sea Island, and I didn't know that they were golf centric. I just knew that it was a really high end area, and I was like, well, I've got my education now behind me. I could take my resources and hopefully try and deliver a product that could be suited for the population. And when I first came here, I sort of started to understand, hey, this is a very golf centric place. And 3 years down the line, I was fortunate enough, a PGA guy contacted me and said, hey, I'm really interested in you sort of coming on my team. And again, I wasn't looking for that. And it just sort of grew from that point on, and it just really allowed me to understand golf is very different from other sports. You have strict in seasons, you have strict off season plans, and there's not really any time where you need to really microdose. But in our world, you microdose all the time. There's really no off time. and every player's on a different schedule. And you know, and honestly, like I was talking to someone about this today, just like um how much intensity is and pressure is on the player themselves rather than a team sport too. I know we'll go into some of these questions later, but I just think that like it's a very different realm of sports, and there's a lot of pressure on the line. But you know, just from being involved in that short term, I realized, okay, well, it's a very individualized approach, which I liked. I was able to use my tools from both, you know, the certifications that I gained and through my education. And yeah, and from that, word of mouth around here, we built a new facility. I was able to gain more golfers, and you know, for the part I've been here 10 years now almost, and it's flown by. But you know, it's a very unique niche, and it's definitely grown since I've been in it. But it's still growing. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, Tom, I'm glad you mentioned back in England, because I don't think our listeners would have known that you weren't from the States. So, you know, I'm glad that you put that out there. So got to throw that in.
Yeah, no, anytime you can. I mean, it was funny at the tour event. I was just come back from Connecticut, and one of my players introduced me to another player. They're like, "Oh, he's from Alabama," and and I was like, "Oh yeah, Orange." And he looked at me, and I was like, "Orange Beach," and he's like, "Yeah, whatever. I know an English accent when I see it, but you got to plug and play."
But the interesting thing is, we know golf is massive in Europe as it is in the United States. So it's you know, probably a pretty good transition for you. But you touched on this for us a little bit, but let's take a little bit deeper dive. And what would you say are some of the biggest challenges you faced working with professional golfers?
I think the first off, and I was talking to someone about this morning, just the time that you get with them. Like, I think that, you know, if they're off for a week, you know, they come back from, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks on the road, you know, beds, hotels, different diets, like, you know, different altitudes, say, you know, different states, you know, the travel itself, the wear on the body is, you know, is pretty tough. And like, you know, sometimes you get a good version of your athlete, sometimes you get a bad version. So it's number one, I think that the availability, the time available that you have to really push your athlete versus focus on recovery. And just from doing that, you know, like I said, good 9 years now I've been here, like, you know, understanding that it's not always a good time to push, even though they're home and they're off. Like, read your athlete, understand where they are and where their readiness is. Because if you're start to put the foot on the gas straight away, like, and they may not be ready or recovered from that previous week. Like, for instance, last week was a really tough week in Pinehurst. Like, you know, I saw my players up in Connecticut, and you know, I could just read them. Like, you know, you could just see they were still fatigued. It was very hot up in Connecticut too. And last week, same thing, very hot, humid. And, you know, the climate is taking its toll a little bit. So it's like understanding after a full day, you know, what are you going to do that's going to be effective for the athlete long-term throughout the week. But then if you look down the road, if they got multiple weeks that they're playing in, it's all about that magical periodization. And, you know, I think that, you know, I touched on it earlier, but like micro dosing what you need within that time frame that you've got, because you may only get a week that you see them. So if you get a week, what are you going to do? How is it going to be most effective? And then plan for the weeks where they have 2 weeks off, say. So then you can really get in those micro cycles a little bit better and make sure that you're, you know, touching on more than one variable.
So let me ask you, because I know you do professional golfers or work with professional golfers as well as amateur golfers. So what would you say are the biggest differences? I know the time that you have with the pros are obviously limited based on the schedule, but if you put time aside, what would you say are the biggest challenges or differences between the two?
I think that, you know, like some, you know, obviously you look at some of the best players in the world, they don't have to work very hard at it. Some of them are very naturally talented. And I think that you see that component in some of the players that are at the top end. And then you see some players that work endlessly on the range to get better. And they do get better because they, you know, you see the progress from being around here. You know, you have access members around here that play mini tour events that are going into Monday tournaments to try and play and qualify. And, you know, they are doing endless hours on the range. But, you know, I think that, you know, a limitation to that, again, is just knowing the schedule of people. I think I'll go back to the time component, but the guys that are really diligent now are becoming more and more athletic. I think that there's more and more dedication of time within the gym and seeing this as an extension to their success outside. I'm big on assessments. I think that the understanding one's restrictions, whether it's a structural limitation or maybe a previous injury that's preventing them from moving as effective as they need to. I think that I'm a huge believer of the corrective exercise continuum that you all have. I've used it for, been certified, I think maybe 6 to 7 years now, and I love it. And I think that it's a big part of what I would do with my players. But I think that for someone new coming in that's trying to get the golf world and understand what it takes to get to the top level, like I see a lot of juniors that come in and they haven't gone through a developmental plan of training. Like, they're like Bambi on ice. Like they're, yeah, I hope that doesn't offend anyone, but they come in and it's just like, and honestly, like, they've only played golf. Let's say they're 15 years old and they come in and they've just played golf. And it's like, okay, well, see where they are in their exercise, training age. And it's very, very minimal. So you really have to take 2 steps back before jumping forward of what they see all these players doing, explosive motions and ballistic activity to try and make their club head speed, ball speed go through the roof. But you really have to teach them how to understand their body in this like, the OPT model, like you go back to like the stabilization and, before the strength, before the power, and understanding the needs for it. So, I know it sounds cliche that I'm talking about that, but it's so important. And I think that, if adolescents understand that, then they'll realize like, hey, we can get over some of the hurdles forward, but moving forward. But I think that it's not necessarily a limitation or, to it, but I think it's just getting the adolescents and the upcoming pros on board with that, you can be very athletic as a golfer. And it was never seen as that. I know, Marty, you were back a while ago. You were in with the PGA boys down in Jupiter area, West Palm, and like you saw it. It was they were doing nothing like they are now.
No.
And I think it's very important to see the change that's occurred.
Right, and you look at the direct correlation. I've been in other sports. Wendy's been in with a lot of athletes. Some of the best athletes in other sports end up being very good golfers. So yeah, there's a correlation of athleticism. And I think that has really moved into the space of golf over the last 10 years for sure. So before I ask you the next question, Tom, because you kind of jumped in, and I'm going to phase this question a little differently, but I just want to welcome anyone that's just joining us today on the Master Instructor Roundtable with myself here, Marty Miller, with Wendy Batts, my co-host and dear friend. And we are blessed to have Tom Hemmings, who is an NASM certified personal trainer, corrective exercise specialist. And I'm going to brag for him because he won't. Last year, he was listed as one of the top 50 fitness professionals by Golf Digest. And that's not something you get easily. You get that by earning your stripes, being on tour, working with the greatest golfers, and getting a reputation in a very small group of professionals. So kudos to you, Tom, on that. So I'm going to kind of rephrase a question that you kind of talked about with the OPT model, because I know where you were going. I've seen you work. We've trained together. But for somebody that's newer to the NASM OPT model and gets in front of somebody who, quote unquote, wants to be an athlete, whether it's golf or not, and all of a sudden wants to jump ahead, can you just talk, kind of at a high level, why following the model as it's laid out with some creativity is the best way to get your athlete or golfer ready to perform?
Yeah, I think, again, like, it goes back to understanding one's limitations. I think that, once you've assessed, you're looking at like, okay, well, where's the training age? What have they done in the past? Are they doing this stuff correctly? I mean, I see many college age students come through these doors and they tell me what they've done and before I've screened them, and excuse me. And I think like, right, what have you been doing in the weight room? You've been doing how much back squat, but you have forward lean, you have limited dorsiflexion, like what? So I think that, just understanding the need for foundation, like I always use the analogy of like, would you really build a house on a broken foundation? Like, going back to basics and keeping it very simple and showing what benefit that can have over a short period of time to a new person walking in, like especially juniors. understanding the need for warm-ups and stuff like that, and like implementing that into whether it's a daily routine for pre-round or practice. Excuse me. And showing them the need for corrective exercises and like building that into that, you know, stability level, you know, muscular endurance level, making sure, again, you know, straight from the book, neuromuscular efficiency is occurring at that level, like whether it's a junior, a senior, a pro, an amateur. Like I think that everyone can benefit from that, and like whether you're going back to a phase of, you know, the stability versus like building up, like you've just said, throughout the OPT model. I think you're never, you know, I think some people think, okay, once I've done my 4 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks, I can move on and I'm out of that phase. Like, I think it's important to educate them that, okay, you will come back to that. Like, you know, whether you're working isometric, concentric, eccentric, the planes of motion that you change. Like, I think that there's, you need to explore all of those realms to make sure you've got a complete athlete. And I think that, you know, some of my guys that come back, you know, they may have been on a strength mesocycle, you know, on the road, you've been sprinkling it in, and they come back and it's like, okay, right, now I've seen this in your movement pattern. Your coach is telling me that you're not stable enough and you're losing stability through your pelvis, like whatever it might be. You immediately, you know, reassess a couple of things, and it's like, okay, right, now we're going to go back to stabilization phase. So it's like, I honestly, like, yes, we involve explosive motions. Yes, we work at the top of the pyramid of the OPT model. But for me, like the corrective exercise continuum and the OPT, that stability, you know, strength, muscular endurance is, you know, pivotal for teeing it up to the next phase. I think that you really have to make sure you're firing on all cylinders, whether that's activation techniques or muscular endurance techniques that will stimulate your body in a way that will make sure that you feel like you're quote unquote on and active, for you to actually be, you know, primed and ready to go. And obviously there's going to be a massive difference between a pre-round or an actual workout. But I think it's really important to educate people on the differences of those also.
So Tom, I'm going off script here because you triggered something that I think is really important. You know, working with professional athletes, golfers, they have coaches that are the swing coach, the putting coach. You know, you've got the caddies that are there. As you said, there's going to be multiple times where they're teeing up and they just want to practice, or they need to go over different shots, or they want to practice with just their driver. How do you, or do you have any problems integrating with these coaches? And then what does a day of, you know, if they have a tournament, what does a day in the life of that golf pro look like, and how do you fit into it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that, like, you know, for me, being fitness and, you know, strength and conditioning, like that, like, I'll just use a player as an example. They have a physical therapist, a chiropractor, you know, an agent, a swing coach, a short game coach. Like, you know, it can be up to 10 people in the list. So it's like understanding, like, you know, where I fit in and what my specialty is, and that I'm, you know, first and foremost, not overstepping my boundary. I think there's many professionals that do, and I think that it's important for us as fitness professionals to stick with what we're good at, what we're licensed to do, and you know, where we fit within that realm. For me, like, if I was, like, I just been an event, as I mentioned, like, you know, I wake up, I would go to the course, I'd meet my players, like check in with them during breakfast, and then we would head to do a light pre-round, nothing crazy. And if they have any like musculoskeletal issues, like they may see a therapist or a chiropractor before me to do like the manual work to make sure that we're taking any stress out of the areas that may be overactive, before we get into the activation techniques. So, you know, if you consider that from like the corrective exercise continuum, those professionals will help make my job easier, because they're going to deal with the foam rolling and the stretching and any mobility things that they need to do, because they can manually do it, and then they come in straight with me to activations, and then we start to integrate. So, you know, by the time we're done, they're ready to go. They're ready to walk to the range and get going. From that point on, I would go over to the range, have a chat with the coaches, the swing coaches, and make sure that, you know, what are they seeing? How was yesterday? Like, you know, yesterday was Wednesday, so, you know, they're tapering down, ready for the first round today. And, you know, you check in with them and make sure, okay, are they loading their right hip? How's the videos? How does videos looking? Like, they always film stuff, so we're always constantly reviewing that and making sure that we're checking in on external rotation of the shoulder, like whatever it might be. It's very, as you know, it's very different per athlete, but we would do that and then wait for them to finish their practice, or maybe practice round or pro-am, whatever it is, and then they'll come in, get a light bite, and then we'll wait for a little bit, and then we do a workout in the afternoon. And that's where, again, depending on where the athlete is, the time of the time of the week, you'd obviously taper down in volume, but keep the energy systems primed towards the tournament. Whereas at the start of the week, we can go a little harder, so we can still get that maintenance strength and power that we need during a tournament.
Great, Tom. And you mentioned the NASM corrective exercise, so I'm gonna kind of blend this together. Can you talk about the corrective exercise model? I probably have a feeling every one of your professionals are using it, as well as your clients. But also, is there common movement compensations and injuries you see in these golf athletes because of the repetitiveness of the sport?
Oh, 100%. And I know you two. I know you two have seen it. Not just in golf. List baseball, soccer, like the rest of it. But yeah, I've had honestly, a couple of players that have gone through hip surgeries, and honestly, when it first happened, I was like, oh, no, it's the worst thing. You don't want your athletes to go through that. And then with it being persistent problems, you see weaknesses occur in certain areas, and you're like, okay, well, that's not getting better. You can hit the same parameters, but you're not overcoming that. So obviously, when they seek medical attention, you go and get the experience of seeing some of the top surgeons and physical therapists and teams in the world that do research in hips. And I was fortunate enough to go on both occasions to Dr. Philippon's clinic out in the Stedman Clinic in Colorado and Dr. Bird's clinic in Nashville. And it was a great experience for me, because I was young at the time, and I looked at that as a great experience to see where the corrective exercise continuum slotted in well with what they were doing. And honestly, I was like, okay, well, this is why I use the model, because it matches what you're trying to do. It teaches people how these medical professionals look at injury prevention and things like that. And I think that it's a gateway to making sure that you're taking care of your body and eliminating any imbalances that you can deal with on a daily basis. But I know that's an extreme mention in hip surgery, but when you look at lacking internal rotation of the hip, I mean, any right-handed golfer has always got a funky right hip. The right hip gets very weak and lengthened, and I think that it's just very unstable where they go into that lengthening and shortening motion in internal and external rotation. And because they do it so much, it's important to make sure that you're kind of inhibiting that asymmetry. I think, forgive me, I can't remember where I quoted this from, but if you walk into the gym and a golfer is not symmetrical, or hugely asymmetrical, they're doing their job right. Mm-hmm. If they're not walking out symmetrical, you're doing your job wrong.
Perfect. And I have had the opportunity to work with a couple professional golfers, and I know the internal rotation is crazy. And usually it's usually a quick fix. It's the short head. It's the adductor magnus on the posterior side. Once we loosen that up, it was amazing just to see just that, and then strengthening the outer hip, how that range of motion quickly cleared up. And it was just really looking at it. So I love the fact that you assess and reassess. But that brings me to my other question, because I know myself, I have had people that ask me this question. These golfers want to, like you said, increase their club head speed. They want to be able to follow through. They need to sit back more, whatever it is that they're trying to work on with their coaches. They come to you into the gym and they say, this is what I want to work on. However, being the professional, that repetitive motion is only going to cause more compensation patterns. So how do you talk to them about working the other side to try to find that symmetry? And do you see that there's, in the very beginning, some people that are not happy with that?
Yeah, all the time.
I knew the answer, by the way, Tom. I just wanted you to tell me.
yeah. You no pun intended, but you teed that up nicely, didn't you? It's I think that that all the time. I mean, you see people, and you've experienced it. They get in front of the mirror and they're showing you where they want to rotate through. Oh, I need to get through it more. My chest needs to open towards the target. It's like, you do that how much? You
Mm-hmm.
do that way all the time, like, you know, and then you ask them to throw a tennis ball with their left hand to their right side, and they can't do it. Like, they're so asymmetrical within their motor patterns and just their neuromuscular efficiency and the movement going from right to left as their right-handed golfer. But showing them, like, you know, I love feedback. I think my players love feedback. I'm a massive fan of using sensors and, you know, things like that within the gym, and videoing my players so then they can see what's going on with their movement, whether it's a squat, whether it's a let's just say a cables rotation with a push, medicine ball drill, whatever it might be, and show them the difference between right and left, and and or measuring the distance if they can throw a medicine ball, measure the distance when they're doing it right side versus left side, and show them the reason, give them the bang for the buck of what, okay, why are we doing that? We want to see improvement on your left arm going to right versus just that right to left, and, you know, teaching them the reasons why in terms of slings and all those sub what am I trying to think of, subsystems within your body that are working collaboratively as a global unit, and understanding why you need to be on in all areas and not just that one area that you're doing. And I think that, you know, to be a better three-dimensional athlete, you need to consider that within your programming, which again goes back to the corrective exercise continuum, in the way that, you know, you want to work as an integrated system. And, you know, whether you do things contralaterally or laterally, like, you know, making that a diverse, you know, moving target within a program is massive. And, you know, thinking about like how much time they spend over the ball, you know, rounded shoulders, kyphotic posture, internal rotation of the shoulders versus external, you know, like weakness in posterior side, anterior pelvic tilts, like all of those things. I mean, they're so common, and, you know, you guys hit on it, you know, all the time within the literature that you provide us. And I think that, you know, it's clean cut. And, like, you know, honestly, like when I took the course, I was like, okay, yeah, you familiarize yourself with these, or when I first started. And then I started being more mindful of, like, when I walk around the gym and see certain postures and things like that, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, look at that anterior pelvic tilt, look at that, you know, and like, you're more aware of it. But it's, you know, as much as they're, you know, they're very common within, you know, general populations, like, you know, with the amount the guys travel, we see that a lot with what we do as well.
And, you know, Tom, because I've had the pleasure to train with you over the years, I'm going to throw this one out there. I'll tee it up as well. Is, you know, a lot of people think of golf exercises as grabbing a medicine ball, grabbing a band, and twisting and turning and all that. But especially during our warm-ups, you and I, we have done a lot of work, hands on the ground, closed chain, bear crawls, all these other things. Can you spend a little time talking about those type of exercises that you use as a full body warm up, some of those primitive patterns, and how you use that for hip and lumbo-pelvic separation, et cetera? Because I think a lot of people in the gym think you have to be standing up to be doing golf exercises.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, you know, I think on the, what was it, probably 4:30, 5 o'clock wake ups, wasn't it? We used to do.
Oh, yeah.
It was meet down in the lobby, jump in the car and head over to the nearest gym when we were doing the PGA shows. But I think that, you know, when we used to get to the gym, like, you see everyone, you know, straight to the loaded machines and plate loaded machines, chest press, rows, bilateral, everything, you know. And then there's me and Marty over in the corner doing our mobility drills. Excuse me. Mobility drills, and you know, I bring along my mini bands, and I'm a huge fan of What's That Strap. I'm not being endorsed for mentioning it. I'm massive on that. And we'll work internal rotation, and just like you know, there was no strict protocol that we were following. It was just making sure that we checked all of the low hanging fruit in our warm ups, and we always hit on thoracic spine rotation, external rotation of shoulders, because we know Marty's external rotation is awesome.
It's on my left. It's on my left.
Yeah,
that's a rib injury from back in the day.
But you know, previous injury, but we did it. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that's why we spent time on that. And, you know, then we would activate, and like you say, the bear crawls, the, you know, separation drills, pelvic rotation, you know, whether it's getting some anterior posterior tilts and making sure that anterior core was on, They seem as very simple drills, but like if you do it in the correct manner and the correct format, they can be so effective. And I've been big on breathing techniques and just implementing more isometric activity, during warm-up phases, and kind of experimenting with that and how that can be very progressive in what we're doing as well. And I think that the more I've added that in as just like kind of like sprinkling it in within warm-ups, or experimenting before we go ahead and do ballistic activity, not fatiguing it so much where it's gonna like completely blitz the athlete, but just to turn things on a little bit more than just what the warm-up would do. I've seen some good responses from that recently as well. But yeah, it was. I think it's always really, really important to consider. And I know we got some funny looks when we were in the gym, but it's okay.
Been getting them for a long time, my friend.
Yeah.
Yes. And today on the Master Instructor Roundtable, myself, Wendy Batts, is here with my co-host and friend, Marty Miller. And we have a very special guest, Tom Hemmings, joining us. And Tom Hemmings works with our PGA players, trying to keep them healthy and symmetrical, if you will. And so that's what we're discussing today. And Tom, I think it's important to really think about balance training. Balance training, no one likes to stand on one leg. People are asking me all the time, why do you have me do this? Even though I tell them, if you're walking, you're spending a majority of time on one leg. That's why it's important, and that's why we do it. But can you talk about how you're training and how important training is, balance training specifically with your athletes, especially when you're working on increasing club head speed and overall performance?
100%. I think, again, it goes back to foundations. I think that, a lot of, and I won't name the name of the player, but a couple of the players mentioned about just footwear, just in general, like, what are they wearing on the course, and are they comfortable? Do they feel like they're moving around in their shoe? And the answer was yes. I mean, they didn't feel comfortable, and they had some movement in their shoes. And like, you see traditional golf shoes, they're very pointed. So if you think about like your feet being pointed and narrow, does that really give you the best splaying effect? I don't think so. I think that the more I've dove into that and talked to my players about, the importance of taking their shoes off when they work out. If they're wanting shoes, what shoes are you using? And we've looked more and more into like the shoe that they're wearing a lot when they're walking around the course, because obviously that's the most time they're spending in. And if they are wearing something that's really like, very tight because they like that feeling, then it's like, what are we doing outside of the time that you're in that shoe to help fight against those tendencies of the toes being very, very squished and narrow? Toe spaces. I'm big on trying to get the interaction with the big toe, involve base of the big toe, working on foot tripods, making sure that lower leg extremity is firing on all cylinders before you go into the balance work. How important the glutes are, and possibly the adductors if they're weaker, because I do see it going back to the tendencies with golfers. I think that where they stand very wide and usually pointed the toes out, they're very strong. Some of them can be very strong, flip-flop of what we talked about earlier with the internal rotation, very, very strong laterally, and they go in very, very varus knee when they're going into their squat. Some of them have great motion, but their knees are going way, way outside of their toes, and they're very weak in their adductors. So it's like, okay, yeah, they may be strong in their glutes, but they still got that asymmetry of their ratio of adductor strength versus abductor strength. So it's like, again, it goes back to knowing that individual and knowing what the pre-activations would be prior to those integrated motions on single leg. But I have very tall guys. I've got like 2 to 3 of them that are 6'2" to 6'3", that are very, they're very limited within their hips. Like there's just their structure. And you've seen that on individuals. Like if someone's tight in their hips, like, yeah, you need to understand that that's the limitation of what you're going to do about it. But like, if they are notoriously known for being really bad at a squat, or should I say need help with their squat, what are you going to do about it? And for me, like, single leg motions are the bang for your buck, and gaining more range of motion, unilaterally, and challenging stabilization through that plane, through that pathway is key. And I think that within that, you're going to be able to implement more of the balance and stabilization within that one leg as well. And being creative with, the reactive stability versus strength stability, endurance, like, just being creative with that. And if that's a goal, making sure that you can kind of, again, take it through that progression of periodization, so you keep them guessing on and keep them on their toes.
Tom, this is great information. So, we love this topic. We may have to bring you back here in the near future. But as a final takeaway for me, I know people after listening to this can say, I would love to work with more golfers, either recreational, maybe eventually aspire to working with professionals. So outside of the NASM CPT, the CES, obviously the golf court content that we have, the practical hands-on stuff that you discovered, where would you recommend, once they get the book knowledge, what's their way to either be mentored or find somebody like yourself or in the industry that, can help them aspire to work with golfers at a better and more successful level?
Good question. I think that, like, for me, I looked out and saw, what certifications I could get, like, what areas you can kind of develop an understanding with golf, like surrounding yourself with instructors, surrounding yourself with, if you're at a country club, going and, mingling with the instructors there, because I think that there can be such a divide between fitness, golf, tennis, or wherever you are within a country club. And surrounding yourself, if you're new to golf, surround yourself with people that have been around golf for 15 to 20 years and understand, like, what they're looking for their performance, and, grasping on some of the ideas that those instructors are looking for, because that gives you a better understanding of what they're after. And then if you can then think about it from your standpoint with, your exercise routine, your continuum, your education, your understanding of the body, then you can hit it from this side and you can meet him in the middle. And that was what I tried to do. I think there's plenty of good resources out there. I mean, you can look me up on Instagram, and I'm more than happy to be a good resource for any listeners. And I think that, it's important to, be open-minded about it. I think that there's a lot of research out there in many sports, and I think that, more and more golfers want to be more athletic, and I think that, they're more open to, some of the other things that are going on in other sports. But again, it's for us, it's important to make sure that they're not overtrained, because it's so easy to jump in and try and continue that when they've got to walk 5 or 6 rounds and they've got to feel fresh, and you don't want to change the mechanics of their swing and what they're trying to work on. But and I will add that, not to just try and chase speed. I know that we were talking about, like, club head speed and stuff like that, how to peak up to that through the stages of, isometric movement and stability and strength, and then obviously being top of the pedestal, being power, and explosiveness. But always think about, what's going on as a trainer. Try and think about, like, what do you see in their movement patterns? Do you see that they're moving well and efficient, or do you see broken foundations? Like, focus on that first, put your eggs in the basket to really work on that and fire that up, and then start to move in that realm. Because if you can teach them how to really move well and often, I think that you'll get them bought in, and then you can teach them the intent part and making sure that they are really being explosive when they need to be explosive, and show them how and why to do that. And if you can prime things in the gym, you don't need to go and try and swing clubs 1,000 miles an hour faster than what you usually do. Like, your body is primed and ready to go. Like, globally, you're going to be active, so therefore you're going to be more active, and you're going to be able to hit it further. And I think that that's something that comes over time, not so much a quick fix.
Great
Well,
stuff.
and I think that is you said that so well, and that makes my heart happy, just so you know, because I always tell people you're only as strong as your weakest link. So we work on all the things that we know are, as you said, broken, or that are in an underactive state, and we can get them firing. There's more muscles that are going to fire. So the outcome of what they're looking for actually starts to show, and they didn't do anything other than come and really focus on those little muscles that hadn't been activated the way they were intended to be for a long time. But Tom, my final thing that I just wanted to ask is, you kind of mentioned it, I'm on Instagram, but can you leave your contact, so if somebody wants to follow you and learn more, or maybe even ask questions, where they can reach at?
100%. Yeah. Tom Hemmings 89. I'm on Instagram. I believe it's just Tom Hemmings on Facebook. Just look out for the Sea Island resort for my job description, and feel free to leave me a note. I learned from many people when I was getting started, as I mentioned, and I'm a true believer of collaboratively, working with other people within the industry to all get better. Like, we can all learn off each other. Like, we all bring something to the table. And I think that it's really important, like, for, especially on the higher end of athletics, like, there's definitely egos, as we all know. So it's very refreshing when you have like-minded people like yourselves, and when we work together to make everyone better.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I can't thank you enough. I know how busy your schedule is with your pro golfers and everything you're doing there at Sea Island. So Wendy and I can't thank you enough. We will absolutely have you back in the very near future. So thank you for your time.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks. Wendy, as always, our guests never disappoint. Another great topic in the value of assessments, working on little things, and letting the NASM model do what it does. So, shocker.
Yeah. Yeah,
Excellent.
Tom is great.
Yeah, no, he's a good man. Good man. So we can't thank you enough for joining us today. Please keep sending us. You have our contact information. Please continue to reach out to us. Let us know what topics you want to talk about, and we will get either the best guests or put together the best presentations we can to help you expand your knowledge and help you elevate your career. So, Wendy, thanks again. And for all of you that joined us today in the Master Instructor Roundtable, can't thank you enough. And of course, we look forward to seeing you next week.